Happy New Year, guys. First video that I've recorded of the year. I don't know if it's going to be the first video that I release, but I'm back with another video and I am talking about the issues facing small non-profit organisations. And I'd love to say how I think we can fix them, but I don't know. All I have is my experience, and I want to take you through some of the things that I've learned sort of running Visualise in Motion, and yeah, just things that I have found have made it very difficult and reasons why I'm now having to just rethink various different elements of like how we do things in order to kind of get access to more funding and what have you. For context, Visualise in Motion is a CIC, better known as a community interest company, which is basically a type of company that exists to benefit the community rather than like private shareholders. And so like all of our profits go back into the business rather than into my own pockets. And like I'm in an RM for ages, like at the initial stages of registering the business, because I was just like, oh, I don't know what kind of business works for like what I want to create. I knew that I didn't want to be a charity if I could help it, because I didn't really understand like the kind of reporting sides of it. I felt like that was quite difficult. I also felt that it limited the ways that I can operate the business in terms of like how we could make money and what have you. And so I didn't want that. I wanted the freedom to create and to earn profit in a way that fit the business and what we were trying to create. And so I think ultimately the CIC kind of worked for us. It also meant that for the most part, we could still have access to a lot of different grants and what have you. There was a lot that we don't have access to because we don't have like charitable status, so to speak. But for me, it was the right balance of having freedom to run the organisation in a particular type of way while still being able to access certain types of public funding and like grants and what have you. So yeah. Just wanted to give some context to that first. Okay, so first point is that a lot of funders don't support solopreneurs, but like just like solo social impact people. I have definitely experienced in the last year where I have found a fund that I'm just like, I'm reading their kind of funding principles and I'm just like, this is Visualise in Motion all over. And then I've like read into the types of people or the types of organisations that they fund, and they're like, CIC, yes. But then there's like talks of there having to be like, more than one kind of person on the management team. There has to be a board of trustees and all these different things. And as a CIC, we're not required to have a board of trustees, for example. And so like I'm constantly just met with all of these like barriers, I suppose. But I find a trust or a foundation or a grant scheme that I can put an application into, but I'm not eligible because it's just me, or there isn't like more than one signatory or what have you. And so I think especially like if you think about the last 2 years, right, COVID-19, and like how a lot of communities have just sprung into action to support their neighbours and their just general community. And, a lot of it was just one person just being like, okay, I'm just going to do this. And I think it's a shame to penalise those individual people who have just kind of sprung into action to fulfil a need in their community or within a social impact space just because they're doing it on their own. Number 2, which follows on from that, is that like the information around kind of developing a board of trustees is sparse at best and like jargonistic at worst. Like I've looked into the process of developing boards and I'm just like, what the actual fuck, bro? Like, what does this mean? Where do I find these people? I think it's quite difficult to do, and I've worked with boards before. It's not easy, I won't lie to you. I think there has to be a level of like, I think it's difficult to find engaging boards, and I think that's a whole conversation for another video altogether. But I think the process of even, how do I approach this? How do I find people who align with the mission that I'm building here? How do I approach them? What is that selection process like? And also like, what's the criteria for a board? Do they have to be of certain standing? I know like with bigger organizations, you'd often see, founders and, just people who have like really big fancy titles on boards of trustees, and so just like trying to understand what that selection process, I think, is quite difficult, or it's just written or provided to people in just language that they just don't understand. So I think that's quite difficult. Point number 3 is that the structures, or for the entities that don't require having a board of trustees, so for example, as a CIC, we aren't required to have a board of trustees. It then means that people have to either rethink the way in which they want to run their organisation, or just be shut out of those opportunities, period, point blank. And so, like, for me, for example, we spent the last almost 2 years looking into different funds and stuff that we can apply for, and it's just like, I'm just like constantly met with, and no, you can't, because you don't have a board of trustees. And now I'm like trying to think, maybe I need to, maybe that's something that I have to consider now, but I don't actually want to. You know, I went down the CIC route because it was a way for me to be able to have an impact and to create transformational programs for people without the heavy kind of paperwork and reporting and such that would be required of a charity. And so I feel like by now going down this route of having a board of trustees, it's just making me do things that I didn't specifically want to do, if that makes sense. One thing I have considered though is like the idea of perhaps having a advisory board as opposed to a board of trustees. However, I'm not sure how kind of grants, trusts and foundations and what have, whether they see them in the same way as they do boards of trustees. But it's annoying that any organisation would then have to think about, you know, changing the way that they do things or changing the way that they run their organisation in order to get access to funding. So that's quite annoying. Point number 4 is that a lot of funders don't accept the kind of digital first banks like Monzo or Starling, Tide, and those types of like banks, which I think is bizarre. I remember in the summer of last year, I'm in a group of like other kind of female entrepreneurs, if you like, called the Coven, and there was a lady who was talking about the fact that she had funding that she had accepted, revoked because she was with Starling Bank. Bear in mind, Visualise is also with Starling Bank, and now I'm having to think about, okay, shit. Now, like, imagine like the heartbreak of going through the challenge of writing a funding application, which is not easy, bro. I will tell you that now. It's so hard to put together a strong funding application, to then have it accepted, only for them to come and revoke. Oh my God, honestly, I couldn't even, the thought of that just made me so upset and so angry for her. But one thing I definitely want to highlight, especially for anyone who has started a kind of non-profit or any business in general, actually, in the last like 2 years, most traditional banks weren't even allowing you to open new bank accounts with them during the pandemic, right? So like nobody could really get a bank account, because I actually wanted to open a business account with HSBC, but I couldn't because they weren't accepting new business applications. And then like other ones, I think, what was the other one that I was looking at? Was it Co-op? Might have been Co-op. I think it was the cooperative, but they required like multiple signatories. I was just like, okay, well, it's just me, so I don't know how this is going to work. But yeah, a lot of banks were not allowing new accounts in the last 2 years. And so people didn't really have many options. And I just find it a bit, like, I don't understand the reasoning why they won't accept them, considering they are held to the same standards as traditional banks are. If you have any information as to why that's a requirement, I would love to hear and like know why. And that's kind of top level issues that I see small organizations kind of dealing with. And I don't know how we fix that. I do have some ideas around some things. I'm going to do a follow-up video on fiscal sponsorship, I think, because I think that's an interesting concept that isn't really used here in the UK, but is definitely used in the US, that I think could have some interesting crossover here. But yeah, I feel like I have said this for a while, especially in the last 2 years. Like the last year, I was general manager for a charity. So I understand how charities operate and just how ripe the non-profit sector is for some innovation. Anyone who has had to report on Grantium or whatever, you know what I'm talking about. Like, those systems are so archaic that it's yeah, quite mind-blowing, really. So I'd love to hear from other social impact non-profit organizations and hear about the things that you're facing and like difficulties that you have experienced around running your non-profit. And yeah, I'd love to pull together some like information around that, I think. But yeah, I'll be back again with part 2, looking specifically at fiscal sponsorship, because I think it's a very interesting angle. And yeah, I'd just love to keep this conversation going and learn from you guys and just see what's what. And I don't know, maybe try and do our bit to, I don't know, bring it into the 21st century or something, because Jesus Christ, it's very archaic. But yeah, until the next one, I will see you again soon.